What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we are talking the Tampa Bay Vipers in the XFL. We're looking at XFL fantasy football player rankings and offensive breakdown for the Tampa Bay Vipers. Let's get right into it. Alright, guys, this is a team I'm actually pretty excited to talk about. Not sure how good they'll be in terms of overall record, but I think there's plenty of pieces on offense for us to be excited about from a fantasy perspective, as long as they're able to be supported by their quarterback. But we'll get into that. Let's start off though by talking about their head coach. They have Mark Trestman. He's had multiple teams experience in the NFL, and he has a lot of experience in Canadian Football League. He was the Bears head coach for a while, Ravens offensive coordinator, and then he's actually won 3 Canadian Football League championships. So definitely a pretty seasoned guy, more of your analytics. I've heard him referred to as like the egghead coach, and definitely does a good job at implementing different innovations into the offense, which I think is going to be perfect for a league like this that's somewhat experimental in some of the rule changes. I think that Mark Trestman is going to fit right in to being able to exploit some of these rules for big offensive games, and overall I think that's going to end up working out really well for them. So let's break down the individual spots for the players on offense. So we'll start with the quarterbacks now. This is the one spot that I really think could potentially hold the Tampa Bay Vipers back from being a really good team. So they have Aaron Murray. Now, Aaron Murray played in the AAF, and he honestly, his touchdown to interception ratio was really bad. I think it was like 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions or something like that, if memory serves. However, I will give him a little bit of a pass. He did play on one of the worst teams, so it's kind of hard to outperform the rest of your team when your whole entire team is bad. So I will give him a pass. Would definitely have to monitor this situation going into the beginning of the XFL season, watching training camp and preseason to see if Aaron Murray is able to gel in this offense a little bit more than he was able to in the AAF. I think best case scenario, we're hoping for Aaron Murray to be somewhat of a game manager, but someone that can keep the ball alive, don't throw unnecessary interceptions. Although I will say, I didn't get to watch the scrimmage because it wasn't televised, but yesterday they had a scrimmage between the Vipers and the Dragons, and the Dragons picked off the quarterback twice. Again, not sure if it was Murray. They may have been cycling the quarterbacks out. But if this interception trend continues, that's going to be really bad for Murray. But if Murray ends up farting out, then Taylor Cornelius is an interesting prospect. He went undrafted out of Oklahoma State and only played as the starter for 1 full season, which was his senior year. But in that year, he went for 3,978 yards, 32 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Also added on 406 rush yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. So 42 touchdowns overall in the entire season. So definitely an interesting name there for fantasy. Again, if Aaron Murray ends up not being the quarterback or ends up getting benched halfway through the season, I think Taylor Cornelius could actually surprise people and do really well in this league. But let's jump down to the running back. So this one, I think I'm going to have a little bit more of an interesting take than most people. So the Vipers, they started by drafting De'Veon Smith in the 3rd round, and then they followed up with Quentin Flowers in the 5th round. Now, these are, you're seeing a very similar trend across a lot of teams in the XFL, where you have, a big heavy power back, and then you also have your more satellite scat back type player. But again, as I've said in my other videos, just carrying consistently through here, I think that the more satellite type running backs are going to be a bit more useful in this league, that it's very much promoting passing, and even more so in this offense, just considering how much we've seen Mark Trestman use the running back in the passing game. De'Veon Smith doesn't really offer much to be desired in the passing game. So while a lot of the rankings that I've seen out there have De'Veon Smith going ahead of Quentin Flowers, I personally think that Quentin Flowers will have the more productive fantasy season. He definitely more of your Swiss Army knife type back. But again, I think Flowers will end up being more productive. He's a lot faster and smaller than Smith. in a league where, like I said, slow thumping running backs are likely to be heavily devalued. Being able to catch the ball better, and also being able to play on special teams, which, as we've seen with the rule changes, it's really pushing for there to be more kick return touchdowns, punt return touchdowns. So Quentin Flowers ends up playing any on special teams. That could be an even bigger boost to his fantasy value. So personally, right now, if I'm able to snag Quentin Flowers as either my flex or my bench RB2, I'm really excited to do that, and I'll let other people take De'Veon Smith. I'm willing to be wrong on that one, but keep talking about rankings for you guys. If you're interested in playing fantasy football in the XFL, you can download my rankings for absolutely free. There's a link in the description below, or you can go to fantasyaddictionnetwork.com and get those rankings. Again, I'll be updating those for you guys all off season long as we get more training camp and preseason news, trades, cuts, waivers, injuries, all those things that end up happening. We'll be reflecting those in our rankings as we get closer to the season, just trying to give you the most accurate projection that we can going into this inaugural 2020 season. So feel free to check those out. But anyway, we've talked a lot about him, but De'Veon Smith, like I said, he was drafted in the 3rd round of the skill position draft. He went undrafted out of Michigan and only averaged 4.7 yards per carry in college, which is okay, but not ideal for college running back. In the NFL Combine, he only put up a 4.840 time. So there's possibly something that De'Veon Smith has been able to show in XFL Combine and just meetings with coaches that we weren't able to see in college or the NFL. But really, looking at his track record, I'm just not very excited to see what De'Veon Smith has to offer. He might end up being the goal line back, which will bring value in his own right. But again, personally, I'm targeting Quentin Flowers over De'Veon Smith. All right, let's get into the receivers here. I think we have a few interesting names here that, again, as long as whoever's throwing the ball is able to do so effectively and efficiently, I think we have some pretty talented guys here in the wide receiver core for Tampa Bay. So we'll start with Seantavis Jones. He was their 2nd pick in the skill position draft. He's both athletic and a realistic red zone threat. He's right at his age apex of age 27. I do like the prospect of Jones being very dominant for this team. The Tampa Bay Vipers did trade for Stacy Coley, which will definitely put a little bit of a damper on the volume that I think Seantavis Jones will see, because Stacy Coley is also very talented. But I still like for Jones to emerge as the most valuable fantasy option here. Just not someone that would be worth an earlier round pick, but definitely someone worthy of a wide receiver to try, especially if other people are avoiding the Tampa Bay Vipers because of Aaron Murray. But I mentioned Stacy Coley. Like I said, they traded for him from Dallas, which I don't know whether that speaks more to his lack of fit in Dallas, or just, again, as I mentioned in my other video, that Jeff Badet is really standing out right now, who is a similar profile to Stacy Coley. So maybe the Dallas Renegades just decided they didn't need two of the same guy. Regardless, I do think that Stacy Coley is a good fit in Tampa and should hopefully complement Seantavis Jones. He's definitely more of your slot receiver type back. He is a bit taller, but he's very fast. He ran a 4.3 40 when in the NFL Combine, and his best comparable player in terms of his size and metrics is actually Robert Woods. So I would love to see him play the slot role here in Tampa Bay, and he might end up being that nice comfort pillow for Aaron Murray to get him going, keep him from making too many mistakes. So I think Stacy Coley will be a decent sleeper in this league and could be very valuable in PPR, receiving a decent amount of the team's total targets. And then we also have Jalen Tolliver, who was drafted in the 4th round. He's big and athletic, just not really quick overall, so I think he'll end up being more of the Z receiver to Jones's X. Should have some decent fantasy production. I'm not sure how much passing volume there's going to be to go around with Aaron Murray throwing the ball. But again, if they end up moving off of Aaron Murray to Taylor Cornelius, could change everything here. But overall, I think it would end up taking an injury or two for Jalen Tolliver to be a really useful fantasy asset. And then let's talk about tight end. So their first overall pick in the skill position draft, they drafted Nick Truesdale. He's 6'6", over 250 pounds. Like I said, the first tight end drafted overall, so that should speak to the plans of how the Vipers are planning to use him. He's looked tremendous in training camp thus far, and honestly could even outpace Seantavis Jones and Stacy Coley in overall targets for this team. He's just a very well-rounded, all-around tight end, and I think overall, if we're talking about the potential for there to be that elite tier of players, I think that Nick Truesdale should be at the top of the tight end tier. Could very easily outpace every other tight end in this league. He's in my top tier and should stay there unless something else comes down the wire. But I think Nick Truesdale is a tremendous pick, someone that you can consider in the early rounds, especially if you want to just lock down the tight end position, which again is most likely going to be one of the hardest, if not the hardest position to get right on a weekly basis here in the XFL, just based on the overall lack of tight end talent across the league. I mean, you have like the Houston Roughnecks that don't even have a tight end on their team, so trying to lock down that tight end spot in fantasy is going to be really pivotal to having a dominant team. And I think if you have Nick Truesdale on your team, you're locking down one of, if not the best tight end in the league. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, if you're really curious about how players are looking to be ranked for fantasy purposes, you can click the link in the description below for my XFL fantasy rankings for 2020. Again, I will be updating those all off-season long as we get through preseason, training camp, waivers, cuts, trades, everything leading up to the season. We only have a few weeks left to go, so we'll be updating those daily to make sure that you guys have the most accurate and up-to-date information possible when you have your XFL Fantasy Draft. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any questions at all, and we will see you in the next video.